Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you as part of our celebrations for Black Inclusion Week at England Netball. So, to kick us off, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background of work within the world of equality, diversity, and inclusion?
Thank you, Lucy. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I guess if I start with a bit about my background and how I got into the wonderful world of ED&I, probably similar to a lot of people, it's a passion for me. And I think, I guess stating the obvious, I sit here as a Black woman, and so have been a minority in the majority of circumstances and situations that I found myself, even living in different countries. So I think at an early age, when you start to think about what makes you different, how that impacts you, and as you go through those life experiences, go through those challenges, I think once I entered the corporate world, I realized that I could have a real impact. I could impact others, I could guide others, I could shape what organizations did. I could open up the eyes of leadership and getting them to really understand how important equality, diversity, and inclusion is in any organization, in any sector. So definitely started as a passion. I think it's almost become a full-time role for me. Whilst my background is in communications, I look at ED&I through a communications lens. So again, thinking about how do you connect audiences? How do you engage audiences? How do you get the storytelling element out so that people can have a real understanding of what it's like to be different, and how that manifests itself, whether in a working environment, whether in a peer social environment, and the impact that that can have in who you are and how you turn up. So that's how I've woven it into my life. And I do that through working with other organizations in the corporate world and advising them, whether that's on strategy, whether that's on initiatives, and also whether that's in communication. And obviously more recently, having the pleasure to join England Netball, doing that through a board role, and almost doing it slightly removed, but being able to, again, hopefully work with the leadership, give some insight and share some of the experiences that I've had in other organizations, and hopefully I can bring that here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've no doubt you'll be a real asset to the board of England Netball and the sport of netball as well. And I think what really stands out for me listening to you speak, and certainly from reading your bio, is your natural propensity for leadership and how you're really able to combine this with your own personal values through your work in ED&I. So can you tell us a bit more about how your experiences have helped shape your values, and perhaps give us a bit more detail about your involvement in the UK's first ever Black Inclusion Week?
Yeah, I'd love to sit here and say, I sort of rolled out of bed one day and just had leadership plastered across everywhere. And the truth is, it hasn't been that way. And I think I've had to find my own deep value set, and think about, again, how that, I guess, follows through to who you are as an individual and then into the work that you do through your career. And I'm sure many people listening to this will have experienced a version of that as we go through our lives, that sort of intersectionality of who you are as the individual. Let's say your at-home self, the self that you are with your family and your friends and those that love and know you very well, and how that turns up in your career and how you interact with colleagues, and the kind of leader you want to be. And again, I think doing my own soul searching, going through my own challenges, not always feeling like I do have a voice in the room, not always knowing how I'm supposed to fit in with others. I went through quite a period in my early career of what I call blending in, and thinking, do you know what, just head down, blend in with everybody else, do a really good job. And that's all I needed to do. And what I discovered for me anyway, that wasn't enough. And I actually didn't want to blend in. I wanted to stand out, and I wanted to stand out for the right reasons, and stand out whether that was for my talent, for things, a different point of view I could bring, how I worked with others, how I brought teams together. Those were things that were really important to me. So that was a journey in itself. How do I find the confidence to do that? How do I make sure that I can be heard? And I think you do a bit of trial and error as you're discovering who you are and you see what works. And again, I had a few false starts where I think maybe I was probably trying to be somebody who I thought I should be, or who people thought I should be in a leadership position as I was getting more senior. And then I just realized it was about being myself, being who I am, being true to the kind of leader I wanted in my life and reflect that back to the people that I work with. And I genuinely found, it's easier because you are yourself and you don't have to put so much energy into being somebody else or somebody that you're not. But it's much more rewarding. And I like the aspect of bringing people with me. I like the aspect of achieving something together. But I also like being able to give that guidance and for people to look for me and look to me and say, okay, you've had experience, or you know a bit more about A, B, and C in this situation, and think about how I can help. And ultimately, we're all trying to have impact in whatever we do. And that's what I strive for. That's what I strive for. And that's the leader that I hope I am, and will continue to be. And I think it also enables me to learn from others as well, because I don't have all the answers. I'm certainly not perfect. And I think it's a continuum. So if you let people in, if you work together and it's a bit more of a partnership, I think you get mutual benefit out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I attended the webinar that was introducing what Black Inclusion Week was all about, you really get that sense of leadership from the speech that you did. So can you tell us a bit more about what Black Inclusion Week is all about and what's coming up, what events they have?
Yeah, now this started, just, well, I guess by now it'll be about a year ago, and off the tragic events surrounding George Floyd's murder. I think, like a lot of us, it was a moment of shock and horror, but also a moment to reflect, think about what else we could be doing as individuals, thinking about, again, some of the challenges and experiences we've had as Black people in our journeys, in our careers, and in our lives. And I think I came out of that looking to do more. But going back to my value set and who I am as an individual, trying to think what's the best way to do that that's really authentic to me. And that, again, I could use some of my skills and experience and bring that to the table. So got together with some like-minded, brilliant Black leaders here in the UK. And when we came together, it was 100% passion, or everybody sort of saying, what can we do? And back to this whole collaborative nature of, I think, us having a conversation and saying, what else is missing? And therefore, what impact could we have? So when we talk about any aspect of EDI, there's a huge representation piece, and thinking about who's represented, how are they represented? And obviously that is very, very important to have that diversity in the room, if you will. But a big part of what we also wanted to do as a collective was really focus on the inclusion bit. And it's the other half that really makes it stick, is what I say. So you can have a room of a real diverse room of people that intersect, and you can think, right, we've done it. And then the thing that we forget is, how do we treat those people? How do those people feel like they have a voice at the table? How do those people feel like part of the family, right? And in some aspects, I think that's actually harder to do. You can bring in the talent, bring in the people, and have all sorts of initiatives to do that, but making them truly feel not just welcomed, but make them feel equal and make them feel that they have opportunity to thrive just like anybody else is a lot harder to do. So that's what our focus was all about. So it's a combination of us reflecting on our history, us celebrating Black people in the UK and remembering our journey here. And it's a long journey. We didn't just turn up last week. So there's a bit of raising that awareness, educating people about our history. And then the other side of it is working across education, working across employers, if you will, organizations, working with individuals, and working across the community, and thinking about what are the conversations we need to have, but more importantly, what are the actions? What can we do? So we kind of want to come out the other side of this week and get people thinking within all those themes. And again, they can intersect. What is it that I can do, whether that's through allyship, whether that's through leading an organization, leading a team, whether that's within my sector, what could I do to really influence and increase inclusion? And although, yes, we're specifically talking about Black Inclusion Week, I think any lessons learned for one demographic can be leveraged and used across all aspects of diversity. So it's got a halo effect, hopefully. So obviously in the situation we're in, it's all virtual, so it's still all virtual, but that's got its benefits because we can go far and wide across the country and anybody can join a series of our events. You can sign up to see the full roster on blackinclusionweek.com, and you will get all the details of all the webinars you can join. And again, we'll be having really good conversations, everything from, a year on, what's changed for us here in the UK. We'll be looking at inclusive behaviours and what all that means. And again, how you can turn up and show up differently in a bit of a learning, hopefully immersive experience for people to learn about the different behaviours that they can cultivate to be more inclusive. So we want lots of discussion, but we also want people out there committing to change. We want them to think about our themes of communicate, collaborate, and challenge. And sometimes it's not easy to do all three of those things together. But it is about how do we speak up? How do we raise what needs to be raised between us? But then how do we quickly have a plan of action and keep that constant flow of communication, which I think is really important. So none of this is a one action, one thing done, put it in a box, and the world is solved. This is a continuum of how we continue to do that listening piece, but how we come out the other side to have real change and to be the change is what we're saying. So it's a real active push to do something. And I think we've already seen quite a lot of that off the back of last summer, which is encouraging for something that was so tragic, that impacted, I think, a lot of people in a way that probably a lot of us couldn't have anticipated at the time. To come out of that and think this is a moment that we need to take advantage of, a moment where hopefully we can look back and say, this is where the real change began, and we can start to shape the future and hopefully be a very different place in the future. So for me, I'm really hopeful and I'm encouraged by the things I'm seeing, the conversations that are happening, the initiatives that people are putting forward in organizations are genuinely thinking about what their role is and all of that. So that's basically what we're trying to achieve. It's year one. It's our first time of doing this. We'd love for it to be, again, something that's an annual event, but it doesn't mean you only talk about it, you only do something once a year. We want to keep the continuum going. So we're hopeful we'll have a really good start, and hopefully we'll build a really strong platform to build off of for future years.
Yeah, I've got absolutely no doubt that you'll achieve that. And, this move towards real change is reflected even in the hashtag that Black Inclusion Week has, hashtag be the change. It is about encouraging real positive, active change, both as individuals and as organisations. So what can we do to be active allies and show allyship to our Black members of our community? And I think Black Inclusion Week will go an awful long way to do that and to make real positive change. I think for me, your appointment to the board of England Netball seems to be this perfect marriage of values, passion, as we've spoken about, and obviously your profession. And there's been quite a lot of news shared recently about the work that England Netball are doing to become a more inclusive organisation, including the recent Here to Listen forums, both for Black and ethnic minority members of our netball family and our LGBTQ plus community, the Open Inclusion Survey for members and non-members, which we did back in April. And of course, there's the partnership with the consultancy firm Visidia. As a board member for England Netball, can you give us a bit more insight into the work being done to ensure that the organisation is underpinned by a culture of inclusion?
Yeah, well, you've mentioned a whole host of already really good initiatives and activity that's taken place, over the last year and past few months. And I think a lot of people will probably attest to it's very visible to be able to see the listening exercise and the getting people together and giving people a trusted environment and a safe environment to speak about their experiences and speak about how they're feeling. And as I mentioned before, that is critical. It's critical that we don't make assumptions. We give people the space and the time and create that psychological safety so that you've got your finger on the pulse of what is actually happening. And I must also say, how people feel about what's happening is also as important as the thing itself, right? Or the action itself. So I think all of those things have been beneficial, have given England Netball, again, some insight, maybe some areas that they didn't know there were challenges. They didn't know that there was more work to do. So I think that listening exercise has been very beneficial. I think some of the things that probably is less visible to the audience and isn't necessarily on the website and is work going on in the background. From a board level, we're really trying to work with the leadership and think about how do you embed ED&I into the culture of the organization. And yes, there will be initiatives and concrete ways of whether that's celebrating Black players and the Black people within the community, whether that's encouraging, again, diversity into our netball community. There are lots of things we can do, but I go back to that inclusion piece, which is really important. And inclusion is something you'll find in your culture. And you can put things in place to facilitate it, let it grow, and let it cultivate itself, but you can't instruct it, which is very important. So I think what we're trying to do across leadership, and I say the board and the leadership within England Netball, is really make sure we've got all the right things in place for that culture to be able to grow and to thrive and give the support that's needed, training that's needed, education that's needed. So that's what we're looking at. And a lot of that goes well beyond governance, right? Obviously, we want to make sure we're doing all the right things from a governance point of view, but we're going well beyond that. And I always say this is my personal thing. I would love to get to a place in society where 3 letters, 2 letters, they don't exist. They don't exist because it's just the way we are. So we don't have to have a term for it. It doesn't have to have its own separate plan. It's just woven in to the way that we do things, the way we exist, the way we are. That for me is the aspiration. And I think England Netball is doing a lot to make sure that that has a pathway to actually happen. So we will continue with the listening piece, because again, it's not just listen once and shut the door. It's a continuum of listening, getting that feedback, conversation and discussion. But then it's us looking at that insight, the information we get, the stories that we hear, and think about then what do we need to do to make things better, to facilitate that culture that we know we do have, but we can make it even better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly watch this space. It sounds like there's a lot of work being done and all to move towards becoming a really truly inclusive culture in every sense. And as you say, weaving it into the fabric of the organisation and the sport as a whole. Jennifer, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you, and go well and hopefully speak again soon. And good luck with Black Inclusion Week.
Thank you so much. Again, an absolute pleasure to be here. And hopefully, again, this is the beginning of something great. Thanks for having me.